Good morning again, friends. Lovely to hear those conversations, and we have the opportunity to enjoy continuing the chat over morning tea. But to my right is Adrian. Please give him a warm welcome. Woo! Adrian, are you a Parramatta or Penrith supporter, or you don't really care?
Probably neutral, but
Okay,
because I'm in Para, I'll say Para.
Okay, all right. Now we're going to hear your story of how you came to know Jesus and kind of what you've been up to a little bit this year. You grew up going to church. It was the thing that your family did together, and being part of youth group and things like that. And found your way going to university, was involved with a Christian group there at university. And I think you were telling me before that Jesus, there came a point where you had to accept Jesus for yourself, and not just kind of piggyback off your parents' faith, and that Jesus was more than just kind of a bunch of stories in the Bible, but actually he is the story of the Bible. Talk us through when you started working and entered the workforce and what that was like for you and you living out your faith as a Christian.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say spat out into the workforce. I was introduced to the full-time workforce at the tender age of 21 after a 3-year university degree. Started in a corporate workplace, and for the first time in my life, I think I was exposed to people that I didn't get to choose to hang out with. So I think up till high school and university, I was still able to largely center my friendships and people in my life as Christians. But in the workplace, I started to see a lot of different people from different backgrounds, different life stages, different aspirations as well. And it became pretty clear really early on that people lived very differently to the life that I had known as a Christian. And so I could see the values in what they did during work was very different. There's a lot of emphasis on money, on status, on climbing the corporate ladder. And I think for me, being bright-eyed, fresh grad, some of that eventually rubbed off on me, and it seemed like a brand new shining toy. And I think subconsciously or intentionally, I bought into that idea of that work would be such a big part of my life. And for the next year or so, I think I really spent a lot of time starting to make that as my focus and my priority. And as I prioritized work and what that looked like for me, I started to deprioritize my relationship with God. And throughout that time, I was still going to church, but calling myself a Christian, but really I think in retrospect, wasn't living as a Christian at all. It was just going to church, going back home. And so many times during that year, wasn't really speaking to anyone. I could just go to church and go home and just be by myself. And it became clear after a year of doing that I had to really make a choice of either leaving my faith completely. It was stop playing pretend and actually just go live my life in the secular world, or actually recommit my faith. And I think during this stage, I knew God was real. I always knew he existed. And so after a bit of time mulling over, I decided to recommit my faith.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for taking us through that story. And really, it's a beautiful, just linking it to the kids' talk, where else have we to go? You alone, Jesus, have the words of eternal life. And I think that was the journey that God was taking you on as you went through that workforce transition, which many people do. Now, with a renewed faith, you decided to also look for a new church community, partly, expose yourself to people from a different ethnic background, different stages of life. And this is when COVID was happening, so you're seeing all bunch of churches. You eventually land here at MBM, which we're super thankful for. But talk us through that transition of, with a recommitted faith, of trying to find a home in a new church.
Yeah, I think during that stage of my life, I think God really opened my heart again to hear and see him clearly after kind of such a long period of being in a haziness. And as part of that, my eyes were open to kind of seeing how people live their lives for Jesus at church here at MBM. I think from both MTS workers to lay workers to ministry workers, I think really saw how Jesus transformed and made that their priority in how they lived their life and how that fit into their work, or how work rather fit into being a Christian for them. And so yeah, that year was also when COVID first started, lockdown, work from home. My office was half a meter away from my bedroom, my bed. And so, yeah, I think in those years of that first year of working from home, I caught myself looking out the window multiple times going, is this what God has called me to do? Sit behind a desk at my computer. And I felt like there was more. There's something underlying that I could explore a bit more. And I really took the time to really think through what that looked like in terms of how did my work translate to serving Jesus. And through that process, really came to a decision, or came to identifying my strengths first. And upon a lot of reflection and mulling over and praying to God, it became quite clear that I wanted to move into a place where I could work with people and be a bit more on my feet and a bit more relational. And somehow the idea of going back to uni kind of popped back in to explore occupational therapy in a master's. And really took the time to mull over that in light of, I guess, my life situation and whether that was the best thing to do. I think going back to uni was never really something I'd entertained in my life. I've never been super studious. And I remember finishing my first degree saying this is the last time I would open a textbook. So it was pretty, I guess, significant for me to even entertain the idea and let it, be kind of such a big decision in my life.
Yeah. And so some things got clarified there in terms of the way that God's wired you and a direction, a clarity of, what you're doing with your life and how does work fit into that. So you apply for occupational therapy. It's quite a detailed application. It gets knocked back. So you didn't get a position to go and do the study. Talk us through, just how you processed that disappointment, that grief.
Yeah, so I think the decision to actually apply took a whole year, throughout the whole of 2021, still during kind of lockdown. It was a very long, drawn-out, scary decision to come to, and when I thought I had made this decision for God, and it seemed really clear that this was a path for me to, redirect my career in a way that would be able to glorify Him. When that opportunity, when that door didn't open, I think that was very, almost heartbreaking and disappointing. The feeling of rejection, for the first time in my short 27 years of life, went into a bit of a mental health spiral. It was very, very tough for me. And I think in, what was supposed to be probably the most exciting period of my life, I'm getting married at the end of this year, became actually the most difficult year of my life. Trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life, what that looks like, where does God fit in? And I think spent a lot of time wrestling with God, going, why did you put this conviction in my heart for such a long time, and then not open that door? And so leaving me almost kind of hanging there with this desire to want to serve you, but not have the opportunity, so to speak.
Yeah, and you were telling me before about just, I guess now that you look back on it, a lesson that came out of it was maybe over-investing in it and a misplaced hope that this was going to be the answer, this was going to be the thing that satisfies you, and your identity was going to be as an OT now. Yeah. That then led to you taking a career break, which you're in the middle of at the moment. And as part of Adrian being on a career break, he's generously given up a day a week to serve at church. So you spend Tuesdays in the office with a bunch of other people who are also giving up a day a week at church. And that's involved a range of different things, one of which has been having a regular sort of training time where one of the members of staff comes and shares and you get a chance to ask questions and we open up the Bible and all that sort of stuff. But there was a particular session a few weeks ago where Kim Morris, our women's pastoral minister, who's also a counsellor, came and did a session. Do you want to talk us through how that particularly impacted you, that session?
Yeah, I think those training sessions are probably my highlights of the one day a week at church. But this particular session with Kim was on burnout and boundaries. And I think leading up to it, I always kind of threw the term loosely that I was burnt out from work. But in that session, Kim really kind of broke it down on what burnout actually is and how different aspects of your life ultimately contribute to burnout. And for me, I thought it was just the work aspect, but actually it was a whole range of different things: my emotional health, spiritual health, physical health. Everything culminated and was off balance and thrown off. And it gave me the opportunity to actually identify why I felt like how I felt at the beginning of the year, and the certain feelings and emotions. It all became very clear and almost palpable in terms of being able to actually put a finger on those feelings and emotions. So that became fairly real and helpful in many ways.
I remember driving to pick up my daughter after that session with you, and in the car, you were like the light bulb had gone on. And in many ways, that's what's enabled you to clarify and explain what your journey with such clarity. How are you feeling at the moment? And kind of talk us through, what you've understood about God in all this process.
Still very uncertain, to be honest. Getting married in a couple months, which is certain.
That lovely lady over there.
But I think I still honestly don't know where God's taking me, and whether that's going back to my old job, how I'll deal with that, I'm not sure, or whether it's a new job, or even going back to uni and starting a new career. That's still all up in the table. But I think as I reflect over the last year and even the last couple of years and the journey God's taken me on, I think with all this uncertainty and I guess guessing and not being comfortable, I'm reminded that I'm still a child of God, and that that is certain. And whether I'm in the workforce or I'm on a career break and not working, not doing anything, I'm reminded that He still loves me and He still has a great plan for me, and I can still glorify God in the workplace and not the workplace.
Well, Adrian, you are such an encouragement to us, and the way in which you were blessed when you first walked into MBM is the way that you are blessing us now as you share your story. I've invited Kim to actually run that session for us here at Parramatta for everyone. So that's coming up in a few weeks' time. I think the details are up on the screen. We're going to do something after church, October 16, 11:45. So put that in your diaries. If you'd benefit from that, Kim is super, super helpful when it just comes to living everyday life. And we all need help with that because we get stuck. So that's not just thinking about serving at church, but it's across all areas of life. So put that in your diary. And let's give Adrian another round of applause. And we're going to turn to prayer now. So I'm going to ask Eva to lead us in a time of prayer.